Welcome to Hey Chaplain. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. Hey Chaplain is the officer wellness podcast, which brings you expertise and wisdom from police officers around the world. From the LAPD to Scotland Yard, the guests on Hey Chaplain are sharing their wisdom and experience so that you don't have to do everything the hard way. I hope that you are listening to every episode of Hey Chaplain, and most of you are listening on your phone, which means you're listening on a podcast app which has a feature called following or subscribing, which means that the app looks for every new episode and in some cases will even download that automatically. Whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, or any other podcast app, make sure that you are catching every episode of Hey Chaplain. Today, our guest is Kelly Enos. I brought Kelly on to talk about making a successful career change from law enforcement to teaching criminal justice and police science at the college or university level. Kelly made that very career change unexpectedly less than 10 years into his career, but he found success in academics in his second chapter, and he wants to share with you how to make that change. Now, I don't know if teaching in the local community college is in your future, but I do hope that this begins the brainstorming session for how to apply your law enforcement skills to a different career track whenever you might need it. Kelly Enos always wanted to be a police officer and wanted to do that for his entire career. He worked at the Culver City Police Department and then the LA County Sheriff's Department in high crime areas during some of the worst drug and gang violence of the early 1990s. But a sudden violent encounter and subsequent legal battle changed his life unexpectedly. Here's Kelly Enos.
August 13th, 1991, I was getting ready to go home. I had finished PM shift. It was about 10 o'clock at night. I'm in the dressing room, locker room, taking off my gear. A help call comes out. So anyone that's available, detectives, whoever, you drop what you're doing and you go. So I had some of my gear off, and I knew in that area, there weren't a lot of deputies working. And I thought, well, screw it. I'll just throw my gear on and I'll take off. So I ran out in the parking lot, found a trainee who I didn't know. I grabbed him. I said, come on, man, we're going. We found a car we jumped into and boom, we took off. And as we're rolling to the scene, which was a little ways away, it was a good 5-minute run, rolling code 3. We were getting updates on the radio that basically this guy had shown up at his mom's house and refused to leave. Mom had a restraining order against him. He had a history of violence towards his family. The neighbors were scared of him. And when the deputy showed up to say, hey, you got to go, he threatened to kill him. He had a buck knife in his waistband and a fanny pack, and they hadn't searched him yet. And they tried to arrest him, but he told them, hey, back off. You're going to meet your maker. So essentially, he threatened to kill him. So it was a training officer and his trainee. So we're getting updates. The guy's possibly 5150, which means he's got mental health issues, and he's possibly under the influence of PCP. We get there. We have a sergeant. We set up a skirmish line, and we have a plan. Okay, we're going to ask him one more time. If he doesn't cooperate, we're going to shoot him with a taser. Now, this is back in the days where only a sergeant carried a taser, and they weren't that terrific. They weren't that. The tasers were still in their infancy.
Some would say the tasers aren't so great now. But
yeah, exactly. They do have their limitations. So the guy says basically, "Screw you! I'm not going to do it." So he hits him with the taser twice. Has no effect. He hits one of the deputies. The trainee I had. He hits him in the head, knocks him down, and the trainee had his gun in his hand, and the gun flew out of his hand. So the guy starts to run. We kind of follow him, and 2 deputies tackle him on this walkway, and a general fight ensues. I run up to the guy's head area, and he sees me, and he reaches up and grabs my leg with one arm, and then reaches down underneath his waistband with the other, where the knife was. No one's got control over this guy's hands. They're trying to get control of his legs. He was a big guy, 6'1", 200 pounds. And they can't control him. They can't stop him. And so I gave it a little bit of time. No one's doing anything. And I knew right then when he reached underneath his waistband, I knew what he was going to do. I have seen people get stabbed before. In my lifetime, I've seen it twice right in front of me. And I know how fast it happens.
Yeah.
I pulled out my gun. I told everybody, get out of the way. I'm going to shoot him. And everyone kind of jumps off and I fire. And another deputy fires as well. He lets go of me. We back up. We handcuff him. And he died shortly thereafter. So we captured the whole thing on audio tape, which actually supported our story later on with investigators and such.
Yeah.
At that point, I get transferred to the station. Homicide does an interview with me. Kind of standard practice. And I had been through it before. I had been through a shooting before when I was at Culver City. A little different circumstances, but I was familiar with the process. And then, they send you home. And then 2 days later, I get a call that they're putting me on admin leave, which in some cases, they do that.
Sure.
To kind of put this in context, there was 4 shootings during this time by the LA County Sheriff's Department, all fatal, and one after another. And it was right after the Rodney King incident. And it was one of those things, Jared, that just the media just kind of glommed onto it. Oh my gosh, we've got these deputies out of control. They're just shooting people and, this and that. So there was a lot of controversy about these 4 shootings to the extent that the sheriff was concerned about it. And then the district attorney finally said, hey, look, we're going to give all 4 of these shootings to a grand jury. Let them make the decision if there's any criminal wrongdoing here, which is unusual. LA County doesn't do that. Usually it's the DA that makes that decision. So to kind of cut to the chase here, we were invited to testify at the grand jury. And so we testified. And then, let's see, we're getting into December. The grand jury comes back with a no indictment on all 4 shootings.
Okay.
No criminal wrongdoing. The FBI had initiated a civil rights investigation. That went to a federal grand jury, no indictment. So we were cleared of any criminal wrongdoing. In January, February, we were notified by the department that they were terminating us for an out-of-policy shooting. So it was myself, this other deputy, and another shooting out of Lakewood, I believe. So we appealed it to the Civil Service Commission. And again, for your listeners, I won't go into a lot of detail because of time, but eventually the Civil Service hearing officer and the commission ruled in our favor. Yeah, this is an in-policy shooting, based on the merits of the case. And the department appealed it. Eventually it went to the Superior Court judge. And the Superior Court judge reaffirmed what the Civil Service hearing officer and commission initially ruled, that this was an in-policy shooting. It was within scope, or it was within the penal code of the California, Graham versus Connor. You guys are ordered back to work. During this time, I had some trouble with the shooting itself. Not only the trauma that I went through, even though this was a second shooting I was involved, this was up close and personal.
Yeah.
I had shot this guy point blank. And there's a book by Dave Grossman. Some of your listeners might be familiar with him, that he talks about the level of trauma you experience as you get closer to your adversary.
I've had Dave on the show.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So Yeah. Good guy. I was dealing with that, the controversy, and I was getting therapy, and the department, I was seeing a psychologist and therapist, and he said, yeah, there's no way you're going back. You're done. I just didn't want to put myself in that position again. So eventually the department, after we were reinstated on paper, the department gave us a retirement, service-connected retirement. But then I thought, okay, what do I do now?
How old were you?
Oh, gosh, I think I was 28, 29. I was still a young guy. Yeah. What the heck do I do? So now we're talking about the transition. I knew I had to get educated, get your college education. You never know when you can use it down the road.
Yeah.
So I had some college classes underneath my belt, but I went pretty much almost all the way. I got my associate's degree and then went on to a bachelor's. And after the bachelor's degree, I started teaching traffic school. And this is relevant to what we're going with this. Just for beer money. And I had a captive audience. They couldn't leave. They had to stay there no matter how crappy I was as an instructor. They have to stay.
Yeah.
But I learned how to teach and I got feedback from folks and I kind of liked it. And after a few years of doing it, I thought maybe I can teach at a community college like a lot of ex-cops or current officers do. So I made a cold call to a local community college and asked them, hey, do you guys need any instructors to teach criminal justice classes? And to my surprise, he said, yeah, I'm the department chair. Send me your resume and we'll let you know. I got a call back about a month later. Hey, yeah, we got a class starting in a couple weeks or whatever it is. Come on in and we'll set you up. It was that easy, which is unusual.
I was going to ask, is that your recommended, like just cold call the community college?
No, that's not recommended. Don't depend on that. But it wasn't the first time it happened. So I started teaching part-time there. And then I went for my master's degree at Cal State LA. So I'm teaching part-time at Cal State LA now. I'm teaching ultimately full-time at Mission College. They hired me full-time to run the department, the program, back in 2007. Yeah, I want some of your listeners to be aware that try to position yourself where you're ready for opportunities that will come your way.
Yeah.
And you'll never know. Some come out of the blue, like the story I'm about to tell, how I became a dean at the college, actually out of another tragedy that occurred. In 2019, October 2019, I was working, it's regular full-time faculty member running the department, and we were notified. One of our deans, Darlene Montez, super nice person, just a sweetheart. She was leaving her house to go to work that day, coming to campus, and she was taking her dad to a doctor's appointment. Something happened. Her dad killed her. Before they left the house, he pulled out a knife and stabbed her to death. He had a history of violence. The family had warned her not to take this guy in, but she felt some obligation because that was her dad.
Yeah. We
were shocked. We all knew Darlene. Our VP went to school with her, and we were in mourning. And I immediately reached out to two of the vice presidents and said, hey, look, whatever you need, let me know. Whatever I can do. 2 days later, I get a text message or a phone call from one of the vice presidents. And he said, hey, what are you doing right now? I said, well, I'm just getting here to campus. Come see me. And I said, okay, what can I bring you? What can I do for you? He said, bring your enthusiasm and an open mind. I thought, what the heck does that mean? So I show up along with another vice president, and they said, hey, we'd like you to step into that role to replace Darlene because we can't leave that position vacant. You don't have to tell us right now, but we'd like you to consider it. And, I thought for a minute, and I thought, I can't say no. So I said, sure. Yeah, let's do it. Now, I couldn't have done that unless I had at least a master's degree.
That was going to be my next question, is you surely had to at least done your master's to be even considered. I mean, that's just kind of a prerequisite. So
it's a prerequisite they couldn't waive.
Yeah.
So I said, I'll do it. I'm helping up the campus, and it's a tragedy, and everyone's in the mourning, and yeah, for the good of the organization. And I was humbled that they put their trust in me to do this type of work.
That is prestigious, but did that also take you out of some of your classrooms?
Oh, yeah. Oh, teaching stopped.
Yeah.
I wasn't a faculty anymore. I was an administrator.
Yeah.
I told them, I said, look, I still have this part-time gig at Cal State LA. I'm not willing to give that up. That's going to be part of the deal here. And they said, sure, no problem. Just, make up the time. And I was perfectly fine with that.
That actually does ease the transition a little bit.
It did.
Because a lot of people are looking for promotions, even within law enforcement.
Yeah.
But they don't realize, okay, with that promotion, that means I'm not on the street anymore. I'm not working my cases anymore.
Yeah.
And then they feel the sense of loss. Even though they've got the job they aspired to,
sure,
they feel that loss. And that hurts sometimes unexpectedly.
Yeah. I was ready for a break from teaching. And then I walked into this role, and then COVID hit a few months later, and that changed everything across academia. So we were dealing with that.
Yeah.
But
what a great time to be a new administrator.
Yeah, it was baptismal by fire, let me tell you. But you know what I had going for me? I had a chief of police at Culver City, Ted Cook. He's still around. I talked to him about a year or so ago. He's still around. And he had a great leadership style. And I kind of adopted that when I became a dean over the division I was overseeing. And it gave me an opportunity to practice some of those leadership techniques and strategies at an administrative level. And it worked very well for me. I had probably 50, 60 people that were working in the area that I had to oversee. And the division they gave me had some problems. It was not trouble-free. There were some issues there I had to deal with. But yeah, it was for 2 years I was a dean, and it was a really good experience. Like I said, I learned quite a bit. I learned how the organization runs from an administration point of view. It was just a great experience. We did have a new president that came in during this time, and she wanted to bring in her own people, and it was an acting position. So I get that. I understand that. And so she thanked me for my service, and I went back to the classroom, and that's where I am now. But yeah, had I not been positioned, with the credentials and the trust that I developed with them over years, probably it wouldn't have happened. So
that makes me think of people who've been, interim chief. They get elevated to a position that's very eye-opening. To be a chief, there's not really any other job like that, to be a sheriff or be a chief, but
sure,
to fill in and finish out somebody else's time, because they passed away or they had to leave for some reason.
Sure.
I've heard a lot of guys be like, "Wow, that was a wild ride there for a year or two." And so, yeah,
it was.
Did you have any conflict with your law enforcement background among the rest of the academic culture? Students on campus or other professors, did anybody give you flack for being a cop?
They didn't.
Even in California.
Even in California, and here's the odd thing. That was a concern of mine going into it, especially full time. At the community college level, and I can only speak for Mission, but I could speak for we have other sister colleges in our district. The culture at least at Mission was very pro police. Okay. I was pleasantly surprised, and I obviously I had to shift how I carried myself. I can't behave like a deputy sheriff or a cop in an academic environment. That's not going to work. Yeah. So I had to kind of obviously change my language and how I carry myself and stuff, kind of fit in.
Right.
Yeah. The community college, I was embraced. I have lots of friends there. In fact, I'm going to see some faculty for lunch later on today. But at the university level, that's where it changes a little bit.
Okay. Might be slightly more hostile to either law enforcement or...
A little bit, yeah. Definitely more liberal.
Okay.
But I was teaching in the criminal justice department at Cal State LA. And so those professors, the full-time professors, were truly academics. I don't think any of them had a background in law enforcement. Some of them had backgrounds in counseling offenders and things of that nature, but none of them had a background in law enforcement. Now, some of the part-timers did. Most of the part-timers there were practitioners, probation officers, a judge, a couple of cops. So you kind of knew your place in that environment. Hey, you're a part-timer. You're on the lower rung of the pecking order. We're the full-time professors, and we publish papers. Yeah. It wasn't in your face, but you kind of got an idea that there was definitely a hierarchy here. I'll give you an example. We were never invited to staff meetings.
Really?
Yeah, we're never invited to staff meetings.
Do we need more former law enforcement to consider teaching?
We do. And that's one of the challenges I've been running up against over the past few years. And that's why I wrote the book. We need practitioners to come in at the community college level that have the credibility with their students automatically. A lot of times we have students that may say, hey, you're just an academic. You never really did the job. So how can we, what kind of credibility can we give you? As opposed to someone that's a forensic scientist working a crime lab and they're teaching a class in Introduction to Forensic Science. They have the credibility, they're doing the job, and they're skilled in how to teach. So students really pay it. That's what they want. They want someone that has been there, done that, and that they can learn from. And trying to find people that have that background, that are willing to teach. It's not just a job. It's not just a paycheck, but they have the enthusiasm,
the passion for
it to do that. That's the challenge because, over the years, we've had folks come in, I've interviewed them, and these are law enforcement probation officers, across the board. And sometimes I get the feeling they only want this for a paycheck, and that's not what we're looking for. We want someone that has the, really the passion to teach the next generation that's going to be filling these positions because they need to be filled. Someone's got to do this work.
Most cops that I know are surprisingly good communicators. They've honed that skill. I mean, that is lived experience. They've learned how to talk to people.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a percentage of those who really might have a passion for teaching or could discover a passion for teaching. How do you go from your law enforcement career to the academic world?
I would say the first thing I would encourage folks to do is get some of the credentials out of the way. Because if you don't have those, it's not going to happen. So I would say at the very least, get a bachelor's degree. Now, this varies across the country as far as what community colleges require. But most of them require at least a bachelor's degree. And typically the field you're going to be teaching in, criminal justice, police science, something like that. So get the credentials and get some type of teaching experience before you apply to some of these academic institutions. Now, the teaching experience could be something I did, traffic school. It's teaching experience. It could also be in-service trainings that you do for your own department. It could be teaching at conferences. It could be teaching in a variety of different settings. So at least you have the experience of getting up in front of people and teaching them whatever material you're delivering. And then after that, start looking at colleges in your area where, hey, do you guys need a guest speaker? I'd be happy to come in and do a guest speaking gig for you guys in your department. It's one way to get your foot in the door and to introduce yourself to the gatekeepers and the academic departments. There's another one I recommend folks do is to get on an advisory board. We have to have an advisory board made up of industry professionals that meet at least once a year to review our curriculum and to give us suggestions for improvement. So with our college, in our area, we have industry experts in probation, parole, law enforcement, corrections, forensic science, alcohol beverage control that don't teach for us, but they're on this advisory panel. It's volunteer. You don't get paid for that. The time commitment's not for that great. But it gets you a foot in the door so you can meet these folks. And at some point down the road, like I've done with some of our advisory board members, I need someone to teach this class next month. I can't get anybody. I might call an advisory board member. Hey, Joe, is there any way you can teach for us next month on this class, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I know Joe. I've known him for a couple of years sitting on the advisory board. He goes out of his way to help us. He's easygoing, easy to work with. I think he'd be a good fit with students, and we give him a shot at teaching a class. That would be two of the things I would recommend to your listeners if they want to get into this field of teaching at a college or university. Offer yourself as a guest speaker and or serving on an advisory board.
The academic world is a different world than law enforcement. Who am I looking for? Who are the gatekeepers? Who should I? It's not enough to just know a professor or two.
Sure.
Who should I be trying to meet?
At the community college, well, actually at the university level too, you want to look for the first contact would be the department chair. And oftentimes you look up their website and they'll tell you right off the bat who's the department chair and reach out to them and offer your services to them. It could be a vice chair. It depends how they structure it.
Sure.
But at least the department chair is the first stop. I wouldn't talk to a dean.
That's shooting a little bit too high.
That's too high. Yeah, you don't want to waste your time doing that because all they're going to do is refer you back to the department chair. Yeah, so the department chair is the first stop. Over the years, I got frustrated with some of the folks I was interviewing. We do have some good folks on our staff. I picked some winners. I have a good staff right now. They're great. But I got frustrated at some of the folks that were coming in that weren't really prepared. And I wanted to think, how can I get the word out to these people? How do you prepare for an interview or a teaching demonstration? And I thought, I'll write a book about this stuff because I looked out and I didn't see any material out there that people have already written about this. And I tailored it to criminal justice programs, to criminal justice professionals. And I thought, I'll write a book on this. It won't be, a long read. And I worked on it for about a year, just published it last year. And what the book talks about, it's a down and dirty. I get right to the point. I don't talk about theory. I don't talk about any of that stuff. Here's what you need to know if you want to do this type of work. So the book goes into, why this is important, and here are some of the technical things you have to get. I talk about credentials, a degree. We look at getting your foot in the door, guest speaker, advisory board, the different types of classes you can teach. There's two kinds called credit and non-credit. So I go into more detail about that. Mm-hmm. I go into detail about teaching online, which can give you a lot more opportunities. So if you're based out of Tennessee, if that's where you live as a cop, you can teach online for a university or college in California. Not a problem. Yeah. So I go into that, and then I go into how do you prepare for an oral interview and a teaching demonstration, and how do you tailor your resume to an academic position? It's different. And so I go through some of the steps on how do you prepare for that teaching demo, which is critical. Because like you and our listeners, we've seen really bad PowerPoints. They're terrible. So you want to wow the committee. You want to impress them. How do you do that? And maybe some other things, use a flip chart or handouts or, whatever you want to do. But, how do you wow them in that 15-minute teaching demonstration? You really got to make an impression really quick. And I also give them a list of references on teaching practices and things of that nature. So again, it's not a long read, but I hope that book creates a spark in some folks and prepares them to teach at a community college because, the pay is well. You're going to be compensated, pretty well. But again, it's a job where all of us are going to retire completely at some point.
Yeah.
And someone's going to fill these spots. Like yourself, I've heard of some cops that retire, even if they have a full career, they retire and now they kind of sink into a depression because they don't know what to do. They don't have a lot of hobbies or
going fishing every day is great for a little while. and then it's like, okay, I gotta do something. And sometimes it's the wife that says, you've got to go do something.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's a noble profession. I've benefited very well from it. It's been good to me. And we've had, we get feedback from students years ago that now I see them, they're deputies or probation officers. And, you kind of feel good when they tell you, hey, you kind of put me on the right path. And it's because of you that I have this job and this career. So it's a different type of job where you're dealing with nice people and they appreciate the work you do.
Yeah.
When we get 911 calls and you show up, you're not dealing with people that are having their best day.
No. Be a nice change of pace. Right.
It would. I would make the argument that practitioners have a duty to pass on the knowledge they've learned over the years to the next generation. They did it with me when I was young. I had instructors that passed on their knowledge to me and I benefited from it. So I would make that argument that I think you have a duty to do that in some way. I mean, if you don't want to get into teaching, write an article for a magazine or a journal.
That's part of the reason that this show exists, is to make sure that the wisdom that officers have gathered doesn't die with them.
Correct.
So,
institutional knowledge, you got to pass it on. Yeah, very important. Yeah. And again, it can be a very satisfying career.
Kelly, thank you so much. This was fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jared, for having me. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
I want to thank Kelly for coming on. I really appreciate him sharing his story, and especially that transition where he was forced to leave law enforcement earlier than he expected, and then he made a plan and put himself in a good position to excel in a career different than what he had originally envisioned. And that's a lesson that everybody in law enforcement needs to take very seriously. I'll put a link to Kelly's book in the show notes. The title of that book is Teaching for Criminal Justice Professionals. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain.
The documentary, for people that have not seen the documentary, Ernie and Joe Crisis Cops, that documentary effectively ruined my career. The filmmaker, Jen McShane, brilliant. This film, please understand, this was 3 years of filming. It wasn't a surprise. 3 years of filming, 300 hours of footage to go down to 96 minutes, which is why it won the Emmy for editing. Kudos to Jen and her team. She was very sensitive in the footage she used of me going through the divorce, coming home to my house being just totally cleared out from my ex-wife. And they filmed me like staring in my empty walls. And I mean, it's really, really personal stuff. And they didn't use it, which I appreciated. When it premiered at South by Southwest, it won Audience Choice Award. HBO picks it up. The chief instantly is offended. And he's like, oh, if these guys want to go be movie stars, they can leave. And I was like, whoa, like, hold on a second. Like, I don't want to be a movie star. And I didn't want to do this.
They're trying to get out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. What is happening?
The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guest and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. This show is free for everyone because of those supporters who are quietly helping behind the scenes. If you want to help this show reach more cops, chaplains, and other first responders around the world, please follow the link in the episode description to support the show. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain, and as always, pray for peace in our city.